Because I preach on Sundays and don't sit in a service to hear someone share to me, it's my responsibility then to make sure I hear from others. And so I'm, during the week, oftentimes listening to other people share. Listen to a lot of podcasts, listen to a lot of different things to be fed myself. And there was a pastor I was listening to just a couple weeks ago. And he said, do you remember those milk cartons that had a picture's child of a picture? That would be so interesting. I don't even know how to say it. Had a picture of a child on the side of this milk carton. You remember? Yeah. And you remember the first time that you saw it? It's like, it about took your breath away. But here's how we are as people. We get used to seeing things like that. So he was saying, the first time I saw that, first couple times, about took my breath away. And I can remember just saying, a quick prayer. God, help find your child. But then he tells a story in this message. And he says, I was taking the trash out to the garage. And, to eventually take it out to the curb. But first we take it out to the garage. So I'm taking the trash out to the garage, and as I'm putting the trash bag into the container, one of these milk cartons falls out of the top and onto the bottom of the trash can. And it just placed itself perfectly so that this face of a child was staring back up from the bottom of a trash can at me. And he said, I didn't give it like a moment's thought. He used to, but he's seen pictures of kids on milk cartons 100 times by now. And he said, I just piled the rest of the trash on top. Just filled up that trash can. And then as he went through the day, you know how God has that way of just talking to us just gently in our heart and in our spirit. And God was just sort of trying to re-soften this pastor's heart again. And just gently throughout the day, saying, what did you just do? Until finally, the pastor got tired of that feeling and that conversation that God was nudging in his heart. And basically, the question God was saying, why didn't you care anymore about that child? And after God kept nudging him long enough, he finally just came out in a moment of honesty in his spirit, and he said, because he isn't my kid. And that gripped him in his heart that he said that. And he thought about his own children, and he named his own 2 children in this message. In fact, when he named his children, he began to kind of choke up. And he said, now, if it was my children on that milk carton, I'll guarantee you, I'd stop working. I'd ask the church for some time off indefinitely. I would ask other people to help. I'd be searching every day. I would, if it took, I would empty out my bank account and take out a loan and another mortgage on my house. to find my kid. Because God was saying to him, if your heart was like mine, you'd have more emotion toward my missing kids. This message is broader than children literally being abducted and missing. That's, as bad as it gets. That's awful, terrible. But I'm working on even a broader theme, though, than that. Those kids are missing from God, but you see, everybody that we know that doesn't really acknowledge God in their life and their heart just isn't really right spiritually, in God's eyes, they're on the milk carton too. So this minister, he's thinking about this encounter in the garage. God reminds him of some stories in the book of Luke. Luke is interesting because in chapter 15, there are 3 stories. One right after the other. And they're parables. So they're stories that Jesus made up for a point. And the point was to remind everybody of how much God's heart every day is searching and longs for the people on his milk carton. So in Luke 15, it begins with talking about this shepherd who has 100 sheep. And one of them comes up missing. And the thought is, by some, we'll just throw more trash on it. Okay, we won't worry about that. Just throw more trash into the can. But as the story goes, Jesus says, but this shepherd, his heart was moved with compassion for one lost sheep. And it says that he goes out and he searches far and wide in the open country, which means that he was vulnerable to attack from other, animals or predators. And he searched for as long as it took, because that one sheep was valuable to him. And he finds that sheep. And then the picture is that he puts that sheep around his neck, lovingly carrying it like a lost child, and he goes back to his community and he says, hey, everybody, I found the lost sheep. And everybody rejoices. And then Scripture says, Jesus says, every single time one of God's missing people comes back and is found, all of heaven stops what they're doing. And the angels throw a party and they celebrate that one lost sheep came back. And then it goes on in Luke 15, he says, and then there was this woman who has 10 coins. And in that day, when a woman would get married, she would have a headdress that she would wear. And this headdress would have sewed in it 10 valuable silver coins. And these were a dowry. This was given to her by her family, by her father, so that, one, it's saying, we want you to know we love you, we go with you in this marriage, we're for you, but if you ever run into seriously hard times, if you have to, take one of those silver coins and use it to help you. And the story goes that she loses one of these precious coins. And it says So she searches the house for it and can't find it. And in those days, the houses, there was only like one window and it was up high because basically people didn't spend much time in the house. They just were sleeping in the house pretty much, so there's just one window. And even in the daytime, being that it was up so high, the houses were kind of dark. And so she's looking and looking and looking for this lost coin and can't find it. And you know how it is when you can't find something, you just start like getting on your hands and your knees, and even though you've been over that place several times, you just do whatever, like to somehow, hopefully you'll find it. And so she starts to sweep probably in areas that she's checked out 4 or 5, 6 times, and she's just sweeping every inch of the house, hoping that something's going to glitter. And then it says she finds that coin. She finds that coin. And she goes out into the community and she holds up that coin, and the whole community stops and they celebrate that one missing coin has been found. And Jesus says, every single time someone who's missing comes up found, all of heaven celebrates. And so for Jesus' audience in these stories, I think he's thinking a sheep might not move you. Maybe some of you would say, or some of them would say, like, it's just one sheep, okay? Maybe you're not moved by it. It's just one coin. Yeah, family and all. I know it's important, but we'll get you another coin. So then Jesus goes for the heart. And he says, but what if it's one of your kids? And he tells this story of 2 sons and a father. And one of the sons does the unthinkable in that day. It's unthinkable now, but it was really unthinkable. The worst, one of the worst things you could do was to ask for your inheritance before your father died. Instead of just going through it the natural way, mourning the father's death, and then there's the inheritance. This guy says, Dad, I want my money now. And Dad, not wanting that relationship to end, wanting to keep, a bridge there, gives the money to the son. And the son, as Jesus tells the story, goes and he spends it in wild, crazy ways, and he blows his inheritance money that his dad had given him. And it gets so bad that he actually is nearly starving to death. And he goes back to his dad because that's the only place that he thinks he could ever find anybody that would care for him. And he goes back thinking, like, the only way my dad's going to take me back is to be a hired servant. I'll just sort of, if I can work for my dad, that'd be better. And then the story, alludes to the fact that his father evidently had been searching every single day for his son. His father was looking, and so on this day, the father was probably walking his property and hoping against all hope that maybe his son would come back home. And when the 2 lock eyes from a distance, Dad goes running to this son. And again, in that culture, it was just considered something that a man doesn't do, because a man has to always look strong and composed. A man doesn't run in that culture. And yet, this guy, like, I don't care. I don't care what society thinks of me. I don't care if I'm bawling like a baby. And so he runs and he hugs his son, and his son says, look, Dad, all I want to do is be your servant. And Dad basically says, are you kidding? You're my son. You're always my son. I'm so full of love for you. Come back not as my servant, but as my son. And we're going to throw a party. And we're going to put a ring on your finger that says again, you're my son. And the idea is that in all three of these stories, something is lost that is of great value. And there's an all-out search in every one of these accounts. And then when that which was lost is found, there's a party. And then Jesus is saying, this is how God views people on the milk carton. So the pastor goes on and he says, it was like then that God said to me, so why were these stories told? Why was Luke 15? Why are these interesting stories told? And then he goes back and he searches in his heart and actually goes back to Scripture. Okay, let me read verses 1 and 2. And 1 and 2 is this idea, again, that there's tax collectors and there's sinners gathering around. And I talk about this from time to time because it's such a common theme in Scripture, especially during those days, that the church people, just viewed tax collectors as the worst people in the world because tax collectors in that day cheated others. And so these were people that the church people had written off as just sinners that did not matter. The church people had written them off and were rude and unkind to them as people that didn't matter. And yet these were people on God's milk carton. And so all of these people who have a chance to hear the redeeming story of Jesus are now within feet of him. And the church people are saying, what is going on with that? For they have no right to be in the presence of Jesus, the great teacher. And so the church people, the Pharisees, they start talking under their breath, and they say, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. These people who are so unloved by everybody, these people who we frankly don't care about, these people who we would never talk to, who don't matter, these people who, in all honesty, are kind of like a blur to us. These people who we don't see anymore. He's talking to them, and he even invites them to dinner. And again, in this culture, when you sat down and you ate a meal with somebody, that not only meant that I want to talk and have fellowship with you, but again, in this culture, it meant I accept you. I accept you as my friend, and I'm happy to be seen with you eating. And so the religious people are saying, you can't eat with them. And Jesus says, watch me. So the pastor goes on, and he says, I learned something in my garage that day. That if I'm growing in my faith properly, my heart will be more like his in response to people on the milk carton. And then he goes on and he says, you know what the unfortunate truth is? The longer that we are a Christian, the more insulated we become. The longer that we know God and are a Christian, this just happens by nature. The longer that process goes, typically what happens is that our circle of friends and people, they also are only those that are like-minded. So our immediate circle of friends are only church. I want you to have friends in the church. I want you to go out to eat with one another and so forth and love one another. But what happens is the longer that we're a Christian, that's all we know are other like-minded people. And we get so disconnected with what's really going on in the world. And we get so disconnected. And we don't know people who swear. And we don't know people who get wasted. You see, I don't think it happens around here, but in the city, you have lots more choices. So you choose Christian doctors, and you choose Christian mechanics. And by the way, I'm gonna start coming to you. So it's like, no, seriously, I'm gonna do that. And we only listen. I want you to listen to Christian music, don't get me wrong, but it's like we just become so isolated that we don't know anybody anymore who's on the milk carton. Oh yeah, I guess we do. I mean, there's still people that work, and there's still some people, even in our own family, who are on the milk carton. But you know what? They're kind of fuzzy. And these are people that desperately need to hear God's truth and desperately need to know some of the things you're knowing. You don't know everything. None of us do, and that's okay. But you know some things that some people don't know, that they could experience this also. And you know some people on the milk carton. Yes, you do. I would generally say, though, let's start to broaden that circle so that our friends and the people that we know are only, so that they're not only just like-minded people. But also, let's start to pay attention to those that we do know and those that we see every day who we just, in all honesty, are apathetic toward their spiritual condition. But they're on the milk carton. But what can I do? You say. I never went to school of theology. You say, I haven't even read the whole Bible yet. And you say, I have no idea what some of these church words mean, and if I get started on that, you know how embarrassed I might be. If I get started on that, you know how bad I'll make God look. Like we could make God look bad. Like we are so influential that we could make God Almighty not shine as well. You know how uncomfortable that might be for me. A couple things. First, we would never say that if our child was on the milk carton. We wouldn't care about those excuses. We wouldn't care about lack of funds. We wouldn't care, like, what am I going to say to them when I finally find them? And what if they don't want to come back home? And how am I going to word that right? And we'd say, like, I'm going to just be, are you kidding? I'm not even going to have that conversation. Like, can I do it? Of course I'm going to look. But here's the second thing I want to tell you. Okay? And it's this. Now, at this point, I want you to not smile when I say my next statement. Caitlin, no smiling. Okay. This body I know you're like, think bad thoughts. This body used to play a lot of tennis. Just go ahead, smile. Yeah, like, when I was 15, Allie, how we doing? When I was 15 and 16, I played a lot of tennis. I lived in Memphis, Tennessee, and it was the thing when I was growing up in those days. I mean, like John McEnroe, right? And who's the other guy? Borg? That sounds like Star Trek, but no, it is Vaughn, whatever. And tennis was huge. Everybody played tennis, and including me. I loved tennis. I played so much tennis that I got heat stroke one day. And in Memphis, Tennessee, tennis was so popular that they would even have these massive tennis courts open to the public in these big parks, and they were pay tennis courts to where on the gate you would put in coins and it would open up the gate, and there would be people in line. So you would pay for whatever, an hour or so, and then people would put their shoes or their rackets in line. It was something. I mean, we played a lot. And how are we doing? Doing all right. So because of that, I mean, there were times that people who wanted to learn how to play tennis would ask me, "How do you play tennis?" And I didn't say, like, I am not John McEnroe. What are you talking to me? Like, I don't know everything there is to know about tennis. Talking to me? Like, I can serve fairly well, but I still got a ways to go, and my forehand's pretty good. My backhand's good, but it's only like one certain way. I can do it, and I can spin it, but I can't hit it with power. Of course I'm not going to help you. Get away from me. No, I didn't say that. I said, sure, I mean, I'll try to help you experience what I know, and I don't know everything. You just want to come out and just try it. And so sometimes people would come to me, and then when they would come to me to learn how to play tennis, I didn't try to do a smash serve, like my best serve, and I didn't try to just wail away at them. You know what I did? I tried to gently hit it so that it was easier for them to receive it. And I would actually hit it in a way that I was aiming toward their body and even their forehand. I was trying to make it very appetizing and easy to understand. I didn't know everything there was to know about tennis. I just knew what I knew, and I liked that, and I wanted to share it with someone, and I was happy. And I want you to be able to hit it back. And so I just, in as non-threatening way as I could, I just lobbed up a nice little tennis ball right into their path. And most of the times they either missed it or they hit it in the net or sometimes over and outside of the court and fence. And I didn't say, what is wrong with you? I'll never play. You are the worst. No, I said, that's okay. That's fine. And I didn't just have one tennis ball. Because I knew I had a bag of tennis balls. And so I would say, here, try this one. And I would try to hit it, and even in a better, more gentle way. And they'd miss, and they'd get frustrated. I said, it's okay, just do what you can. And finally they started to contact, but it would hit it would be all of the, it's okay. And I would, this is how you share God. And I used to be all nervous that I have to know everything. I have to know all of these scriptures. I have to have this plan figured out. Listen, in my growing up years, there were even flip charts that you would use with people. So like, I have to have a flip chart, and I have to have the steps all there. And what if they asked me something like, why does God allow suffering? Oh, it's over. But now I say, I'm still working on that one myself. I have some ideas. I don't know all the answers, but, or sometimes I'll say, I always say, that's a great question. Let's think on that. And so I don't feel like I have to solve it then, and it's okay. I didn't make God look bad. And you know what I do? I hit the ball over, and I just wait for them to hit it back. And sometimes it takes a long time for them to even notice or care or try. But one day, they might hit it back. So you start an initial spiritual conversation. And that can come in lots of ways. One of the reasons that I am so active on Facebook, one of the reasons why I have different things going on, I have just a positive video and statement thing where people can go and just feel positive about the day. I've got that on Facebook. But then I also have a site that's like some more, not heavy, but just more thoughts that people can grow from a little bit more, in my 24today.org. And then I also do these interviews with people on all kinds of subjects. Have one right now for moms that's out there, and you can find them on YouTube and all. But one of the reasons why I do this is so that you can start to lob the conversation over the net that says, hey, I think this is kind of interesting, and you might too. Or just like need some encouragement of your day, check out this site. And I go to this guy's church, and what you're doing is you're just lobbing as softly and as nicely you can the ball over the net, so that whenever they want to, they can try to hit it back. And they'll hit it back in some way that might just say, well, I think that's interesting too. I'm a mom, and I think I could use some help with that. Then however long that takes, then you just gently lob another conversation back. Maybe it's hey, I go to this church, and like we have this event coming up that you might really enjoy. We have a game night. We don't right now schedule, but we have a game night coming up that you might want to just come and just hang out. And you know what you've done? You've lobbed the ball back over again. And then you just wait. They might say, no, I'm busy, or no, I'm into that church thing or whatever. And then someday later on, you lob another, ball over, and someday then they might hit it back. And then you just continue a little further. Like, God really helped me, in this area of my life, and he just gave me some hope, and this is kind of what he said. And then you just lob it back over. You don't have to go through the flip chart. You don't have to go through something that you don't have to explain. You don't have to make God look good. You don't have to feel bad about you looking bad because you don't know everything. Listen, if you get a new cell phone and you want someone else to, like they're interested in a cell phone, you don't say, I have to go to school first and find out everything there is to know about cell phones, because if I say this wrong, I'm going to make LG look bad. And LG can't handle it. No, you just say, okay, this is cool. I mean, I love this feature, and I can text with it, and it's got big, whatever. You just lob the... See, I'm just saying, start to think about those people in your life that are kind of blurry, but are on God's milk carton. And you don't have to be Billy Graham. You can just be, insert your name right now. You can just be you. And you just lob a ball over. And sometimes that starts with just loving somebody and talking to them and smiling at them and sitting with them when they're lonely, or listening to them cry and their story. You're just lobbing over a conversation. And then you allow God's Spirit to just start to work in their heart and talk. It's not up to you, just to talk to them, and you wait for days, maybe months, maybe that night, but you wait till they return the conversation, and then all you do is just lob another conversation back over, and you wait. That's it. But it is starting to realize there's people on the carton that are blurred out in your life right now that you could start. You could start today. It's not that you're uncaring, it's just that you're apathetic. And so am I. Let's be challenged by that, though. Because every time one of those people are on the milk carton, God searches in desperation every day. And he's just wanting someone like you and I that know them, that'll just start those conversations and care. Every time. And it could be, it might not be that you're the one that actually is with them at the point where they come back to God, but you might just start and be part of a whole chain of people that are playing tennis with them. Just be part of the game. Now, as we close, I want you to bring somebody in your mind into focus on that picture. You might see them yet today. You might see them tomorrow. You might see them at work. You might see them at school. You might see them at some form of entertainment. They might be part of your family, part of your extended family. Bring them into focus and say, this is somebody that's on God's milk carton, and God help me to have more of a heart for them, and just start to play spiritual tennis with them. And then see what you do, God, because they matter. Who's on the picture?